Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The J Reels Podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. The sun is starting to set on the first month of the year already. Time just keeps zooming by, people, as you well know, but not without yours truly getting into every nook and cranny on what the sports world has to offer, as this is the J Reels Podcast with your host, J Reels. For my first timers, welcome aboard, and for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as this past Monday, I welcome you guys and gals back, and here we are, just days away from Championship Sunday. And for the NFL fan that's out there, for the dyed-in-the-wool football fan, even the casual football fan, this is your final Sunday, because Super Bowl Sunday does not count. That is an event. That is an unofficial holiday, and we can have all the build-up leading over the course of the 2 weeks after this coming Sunday to have it bubble to the surface on what's going to take place down in New Orleans, and we're going to just analyze and break down and just till we're blue in the face, but we don't have to worry about that. We still have plenty of time between now and then because we have two games on Sunday, which in essence is the final NFL Sunday. And although it doesn't really have the same feel of a divisional round or wild card round or any of the 18 weeks of an NFL season, but we know that this is the beginning of shutting the door or even closing the window on this NFL season, because really after this weekend, this is it. I don't care how you want to slice it. Oh, J Reels, you're nuts. Super Bowl, that's the game that everybody's been waiting for. That is the biggest sporting event on the planet, so on and so forth. Yes, it is. But again, that is a day where you're going to be running around trying to get whatever goodies, whatever food. And if you're hosting a party, that is an event unto itself, because you have to feed whatever it may be, 8, 10, 12 people, maybe even more for that matter. Everything has to deal with the food orders and how much beer you're going to have and maybe some liquor, and if you're going to have a pool for your Super Bowl boxes and things of that nature. Yeah, so that's not a regular, average, or even a championship Sunday. It's not going to have that feel. It's heightened to the 50th degree, but we'll save that for down the road. But as for this coming Sunday, you have some very interesting storylines and a lot that we're going to get into, and let's just jump right to it. And it's going to start with, of course, the Chiefs. Do they get themselves back to a Super Bowl? The third one in the last 3 years, and when you think about it overall, it's going to be 4 of the last 6. And for them to cement their dynasty, and I don't want to get too far ahead because they have to win this game in order for them to have the discussion about three-peating, but everybody's has Chief fatigue. Everybody's just sick and tired of this team. Everybody's tired of Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, Taylor Swift. You want to throw in that dynamic. We get it. But they are one game away and one win away from getting back to a Super Bowl and being historic from a standpoint of no one in the Super Bowl era has won 3 straight championship games. So that is going to be the one storyline, knowing that the game is in their building, knowing that the refs have been pretty much favoring them, and I don't want to get into the weeds as far as that goes, but we've seen throughout the course of this year all the calls that they've gotten, all of the fortunate bounces, all of the, I don't want to go as far as saying luck, but the Chiefs, they have gotten themselves to this point with their pedigree, with their DNA, with their mettle and toughness, and knowing how to win close games, whether it's by the slimmest of margins, whether it's blocking field goals, whether it's just getting the luck of the coin, winning in overtime, things of that nature. So here it is. One more win away from another trip and 2 more weeks of having to dredge all of this nonsense surrounding this team. But listen, have they earned it? Absolutely. And when you are a team that has a bullseye, when you are a team that has a spotlight, when you are a team that's reaching and chasing history, of course, it's going to be heightened like anything we haven't seen. Not like the Patriots of the 2 Super Bowl runs that they've had, whether it's in the 2000s or in the 2010s. Not like the Cowboys in the 90s when they won 3 or 4 Super Bowls. Not the Niners when they won a ton of Super Bowls in the 80s. And of course the Steelers dating back into the 70s when they won 4 of 6. No, this is something that if they win this game, it's unlike anything we've seen because we have not seen a team chase 3 Super Bowls. Yes, we came close with the Niners there when they got to a championship game after winning back-to-back and then lost to the Giants. So obviously that was flushed down the toilet. They didn't even get to a Super Bowl to even have that discussion of a three-peat. So we could go through all the different scenarios, but the Chiefs right now are going to be the front and center as far as the big storyline of them trying to achieve something that no one has ever done in the 58 years of the Super Bowl era, which will be 59 2 weeks from this coming Sunday. Then you have the Buffalo Bills. Is it their time? Is it Josh Allen? And you would think that with him being the front runner for the MVP, I know Lamar, they're neck and neck, and the game last week has nothing to do with them winning the MVP because that's a regular season award. But we all know Western New York, we know that fan base, we know that the team has gotten close. Now, I understand they haven't gotten to a championship game in now 4 years because the last 3 years they've been bounced out of the divisional round. But for the organization, for Marv Levy, Jim Kelly, Thurman Thomas, going back to the 90s to now where it's Josh Allen, Sean McDermott, and the cast of characters that are the Buffalo Bills, can they slay the dragon? Can they slay the beast? Knowing that they could beat the Kansas City Chiefs in the regular season, as we saw them do this year, as well as years past, but they have been unable to beat them in the postseason. As evidenced last year by losing in their building, Buffalo that is, in the divisional round, whether it was 2 years ago, that epic game, really 3 years now that I think about it, the epic game that we saw in the divisional round, which changed the overtime rules at that point, losing 42-36, 13 seconds to go. Why didn't Sean McDermott have them take it out of the end zone instead? It was a touchback, and we know what happened after that. And then 4 years ago when they lost an AFC Championship game, when they were up 9-0, I might add, but fell short of making it to the Super Bowl. Is it their time? Is it Josh Allen's time? Is it possibly the MVP of the league? Is it going to be his time to be able to look the Chiefs dead in the eye and just cut their heads off and put the stake through their heart in order for them to get to a Super Bowl, which would be the first time in 32 years? Then you have the NFC, where the Eagles, you could talk about how they've been able to rebound after last year, starting off 10-1 and then falling flat on their faces with a bitter, disappointing ending in Tampa in the wild card round. And then even with a little bit of, I won't go as far as saying friction, but a lot of the doubt, even after the first couple of weeks of the year, where Nick Sirianni's drawing at the Philly faithful, and then the possibility of Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown not on the same page. Has there been a disconnect there, even said by their current teammate, and even though he's injured, and a one Brandon Graham? But here they are. And even with a concussed Jalen Hurts later on in the season, him coming back and not lighting up the scoreboard, especially with the passing numbers, which we'll get to. But for the Eagles and everything that they've had to endure pretty much since Super Bowl 57, losing that game, having to go through last year looking like the best team in the sport, then fizzling out, and then here they are in another NFC Championship game, and whether or not that they're going to be able to get over the hump, get back to a Super Bowl to see whether or not that they could go for it and get a chance to bring another Super Bowl title to the city of brotherly love. That is another storyline that we're going to have to see unfold there Sunday at 3 o'clock. And then the last one are the Commanders. Can a rookie quarterback bring this team, this organization that has been in the wilderness, has been football Siberia under the ownership of Daniel Snyder, and literally just a year or two in the Josh Harris, Magic Johnson era, and bringing in a coach in a one Dan Quinn who knows his way around championship games and Super Bowls, and having a rookie who has been as poised, cool, calm, and collected as can be? Can they get themselves against a division opponent to a point where not only will they win 1, 2, but maybe 3 road games to get themselves to New Orleans and represent a Washington franchise that hasn't seen a Super Bowl since 26 when they beat, of all teams, the Buffalo Bills en route to winning a championship in 1991? All that factors in the big storylines heading into this weekend's games. And let's just jump right to it, because what else can I really unpack when it comes to storylines with these 4 teams that are left standing? I'll start off with the NFC game the Commanders going to Philadelphia. We know that they played 3 times and they've split the season series. I'm sure you heard it all before listening to this podcast here today. But the one thing that hasn't been talked about, that even though there has been a split of the regular season series, including that second game where Washington came all the way back, and if it wasn't for a Devontae Smith drop, if he would have been able to corral a pass that would have iced the game and Philly would have swept the Commanders here in this regular season, if that wasn't the case, we wouldn't even be talking about whether or not that they actually have a shot to win this game. And we all know that they do. But maybe winning that game the way they did in late December could add a little bit of confidence to a team, knowing that, all right, the game isn't in their building, because when they won that game in late December, it was down in D.C., but maybe that's something that they can hang their hat on, knowing that, all right, we did get a break, but you know what? We still had to go out, make plays, and win the game. And for the Commanders side, how I'm going to look at it is how we've seen it here throughout the course of these first 2 playoff games and pretty much throughout the whole year. As long as the quarterback is going to remain poised, not look rattled, and not show any signs of panic, and you would think after 17 regular season games and 2 playoff games, why would that change now? But the stakes are higher. This is to go to a Super Bowl. And the Eagle team, which went there just 2 years ago, a vast majority of the personnel that's on the roster, but for Jaden Daniels, for him to be able to remain the way he's played all year and to, of course, be aggressive, which you know that that's going to be part of the plan. But one of the things that I'm going to look at here is that the Commanders, in their 2 playoff games, they were able to get 2 key turnovers, or in the case of last week, 5 big turnovers. But when you look at that Tampa game in the wild card round, remember, they got that big fumble there deep in Tampa territory when they were down 17-13, and they were able to capitalize and punch it into the end zone to take a 2017 lead. And therefore, from that game to the Lion game, we know that the Lions were giving out late Christmas gifts, whether it was interceptions by Jared Goff or a key fumble there at 7-3, which could have really changed the complexion of that game if they would have kicked a field goal or even scored a touchdown at that point. But are the Commanders going to get those breaks? And I understand, in order for you to have this magic carpet run that they've had, you're going to need to have a few of those along the way. And how I look at it is that if this is going to be played even keel, no turnovers, and yes, the Eagle passing attack has been anemic, but if it's an even playing field where there's no turnovers, can the Commanders win that type of game? Of course, the answer could be yes. Why can they not, considering their success? But because of what we've seen here in this postseason, them getting those big turnovers, them getting ample opportunity to cash in on those said turnovers, is this going to be a situation where the Eagles, you know, they're going to run the ball a lot with Saquon Barkley? Jalen Hurts, he's not going to kill you. He's not a type of guy that is going to take chances offensively. A lot of that offense is tailored around safe passes, whether it's to the tight end in Dallas Goedert, whether it's to a 3rd and 7 slants to Devontae Smith or even A.J. Brown for that matter. This is an offense that's not going to take many risks or many chances. They don't have a guy that's a gunslinger back there that's going to try to fit a pass in a tight window, and albeit a guy that has averaged over the last 4 or 5 starts of the season, notwithstanding that Steeler game, which he threw for 290 yards there in the middle part of December. But they have averaged somewhere in the vicinity of 150 passing yards a game. And you would think that the Commanders, their defense, they're going to try to do what's best with that very good offensive line up front with guys like Jonathan Allen and Payne and guys like that. And their secondary can be a team, as we saw in the previous round, be larcenous and try to make plays there. Frankie Louvu's a guy that's all over the field. So who knows what they're going to do to upset that apple cart as far as the Eagle passing attack is concerned. But to me, what it really boils down to in this game is the containment of a one Saquon Barkley, to have Jalen Hurts try to make those passes. And I get it. He's going to try to look for those soft coverages and see what's underneath and give what the defense going to, or take what's going to have the defense give him. But from my standpoint, I think the Eagles, they're going to try to shake out whatever cobwebs that they have from this offense and try to open it up a little bit. I think they only have to, because they just can't depend on Saquon to have 25 to 30 carries, rush for 150 yards, maybe a couple of touchdowns in the process, and just kind of kick back. They're going to need to get this passing attack in order. Now, they're going to dink and dunk throughout the course of the field. This isn't going to be Air Coryell of the 70s. Look that up, people, if you're not familiar with who Air Coryell or Don Coryell is. But for the Eagles, I would think last week they dodged a missile. They were this close from losing that game to the Rams. And even though Washington's a live dog here, but I have to figure that experience, and not only that, being able to maybe open up the game throwing passes, not starting the game handing the ball off to Saquon Barkley, which would kind of feed into Washington's game plan, because I'm sure not they're going to stack 10 in the box for Saquon and say, all right, let's let Jalen Hurts beat us. But I would think that they're going to have to look at this game plan to think that they're going to come out probably trying to throw, considering that they really have not had any type of success in the passing game. So therefore, how I look at it is that I think the Eagles are going to come out flying. I know they're going to try to protect the ball at all costs. And the Eagles, I get it. What we've seen there last week where they almost spit the bit against the Rams. And Jaden Daniels, again, he's going to be that guy that's going to remain as calm on the pressure, that he's going to look like a 10-year vet. He's not going to look like a guy who just came out of college and is now at a point where maybe he's extended himself so much mentally, physically, spiritually, etc., to where he's all of a sudden going to fold like a cheap suit. I'm not going to see that. Do I see the Commanders in this game? I really do believe so. But if I feel like this game's going to go the Eagles and maybe they're going to run away with it late, I could actually see that. Similar to what we saw there on Sunday against the Rams, but of course, they were in a nail-biter and had an opportunity to blow a game where the Rams had the ball inside the 20 in the red zone. Do I see that happening here? I'm going to say no. I'm going to root like hell for the Commanders. How could you not? But I think the Eagles, with the two games that have been put behind them here in the wild card in the divisional round, and more so in the divisional round because that was one they had to sweat out. And you would think a team that has been around winning, that knows what it takes to get to a Super Bowl, that was the game that they got out of Dodge and are thankful for. Do I see this game being 31-10? No, I won't go as far as saying that. But I could see the Eagles putting up points. I could see the Eagles maybe even putting up 30. But I would also think that the Commanders will hang in there for 2.5 quarters, maybe even into the fourth quarter before the Eagles run away. So with that being said, I'm going to say Eagles 29, Commanders 21. And then in the second game, to me, this is Armageddon for Buffalo. And I won't go as far as saying, if not now, when? Now, I would say that if the game was in their building, if they had the home field and Kansas City was going there and knowing that they beat them there in the regular season, I would say, if not now, when will the Bills ever get to a Super Bowl? Now, the Chiefs, we all know, they have not won the way the Chiefs have in years past, whether that means putting up 35 points, Patrick Mahomes throwing for well over 300 yards, 4 touchdowns. That has not been the Kansas City Chief offense this year. We could talk about they don't have the weapons that they once had, and Travis Kelce, although had a big game against the Texans on this past Saturday, but that doesn't automatically mean that Kelce's going to have another monster game in him. Probably will, because just like I mentioned about the Eagles, they know their way around this territory. So when they have to dust off Kelce, or when they need a big play, or when they need a first down, whatever it is, Kelce is a guy that for whatever reason always comes up big. But how I look at this game, Buffalo, now their passing attack against the Ravens was not stout in the least. They threw for 1 more yard than the Eagles did against the Rams. I believe Josh Allen had, 127 yards, and Jalen Hurts had 126. Obviously, they're going to need a lot more in order for them to win this game in a hostile environment. But I would think that the Bills, as much as they could look at that game and say, wow, we didn't really do much in the passing attack, and a lot of it was on the ground there, whether it was with James Cook or guys like that, where they were able to get in the end zone. A lot of that was, of course, on Josh Allen, too, with his legs. But how I look at this game, Buffalo, to me, They don't have to play from in front. They just have to be close. And I think as long as they're close and then get some separation in the middle quarters, meaning second and third, and then maybe they have to hang on for dear life at the end, because I think that if the game is close, Buffalo, we've seen them win close games, but we know Kansas City's going to win those type of games. We know that the Chiefs have that just overall stick-to-itiveness, and they have exactly what it needs to take them to get to win a game. Whether that means that they either draw a personal foul, and we know that Patrick Mahomes has been good at doing that, or getting that big first down, or not being able to turn the ball over. We know the Chiefs, they barely beat themselves. So for me, even if the Chiefs get off to, let's say, a 3-0, even a 6-0 lead first quarter, all right, fine. Stem the tide, kind of get your bearings back, get yourself back in the game, take a lead, and maybe go into halftime. Maybe it's 13-10, or just have a lead of some sort. And maybe now go into the fourth quarter where you're up. Let's say it's 24-16, and you have to keep applying pressure. You have to do whatever it takes. And I can see Josh Allen, this is going to be on him to deliver this team. I understand, no shock there. But whether it's with his legs, whether it's with his arm, no matter what, he's going to have to will this team to New Orleans to get to a Super Bowl. I know that Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City could do that, but the big question is whether Josh Allen, because he has not won the big game. Everybody can talk about Lamar Jackson, him not being a guy that has gotten over the hump or gotten that big W under his belt. He came close last week with that final drive against Buffalo, but the 2-point conversion, we know what happened there. But we could also point the finger at Josh Allen, him not winning this big game. He didn't do so in the championship game, as I chronicled 4 years ago. He didn't do so, not his fault, because you would have thought with the lead there at 36-33, with 13 seconds to go, they were home free. Not the case. They didn't do so against the Bengals in the divisional round 2 years ago, and didn't do so last year against the Chiefs. Now, was that all on him? No, but he had Stephon Diggs with that big drop, and then that read on 3rd and 9 where he actually had somebody in the end zone, and he had, I believe it was Khalil Shakir on a crossing pattern, which was stopped, which set them up for Tyler Bass's missed field goal, which sent them home in the divisional round. So to me, this is all on Josh Allen. A lot of the pressure is going to be on him to win this game. And if he doesn't, and if he comes up, I'm not going to say if he comes up small, we wouldn't expect that. But if he misses a throw or doesn't get that big first down, to then have the Chiefs get back out in the field and let's say they kick a game-winning field goal, I mean, all that's going to tie in. But I will say this. I do think it's his time. I think the Chiefs, they've just been dying to be had. They've been dying to be plucked. They've been dying to say, hey, guys, we've given you every opportunity to beat us. And you haven't. And I understand it's at Arrowhead. And I understand Patrick Mahomes. What is he lifetime now? 16-3 in the postseason. Think about it. He's only had 3 losses. 2 of those to Brady and 1 to Joe Burrow. Well, you know what? I'm going to say he's going to have 1 to Josh Allen. And this is not based on what happened in the regular season by any means. But I really, truly think the Bills will find a way to get themselves to New Orleans to play the Super Bowl. I'm going to say Buffalo 28, Kansas City 26. And hopefully that's the case, because I don't want to hear 2 weeks of Mahomes, Kelsey. No, I do not. I'm done with that. Now, as far as what the NFL is going to want for a Super Bowl matchup, and again, they're going to get 100 million. They're going to get a zillion people watching this game. We understand it's a Super Bowl. Everybody's going to watch. It could be Carolina versus Jacksonville, as I've said ad nauseum, and you're still going to get eyeballs to the sets. But I would think that if the NFL was hoping to get a particular Super Bowl, and I'm going to go in this order from 1 to 4, I get it. Maybe they'd want the Chiefs only because of Taylor Swift and that dynamic and have more people watch. Because remember, last year was the most watched Super Bowl and the most watched TV event in the history of television. So, and if you're going to have Kansas City there, that's going to go for history. And with having Taylor Swift, which you're going to see 1 million shots in the luxury suite, I'm sure that they're going to jump for joy with that. But let me tell you something. KC and Philly, if that was to be a rematch, I wouldn't want that. We saw it 2 years ago. I don't know how that's going to play out this year. And yes, they even played last year on a Monday night, if you recall, where the ball went through Marquez Valdez-Scantling's arms, and Philly was able to survive and win that game on a Monday night. But we've seen that movie before. To me, I understand the NFL may want that, but I wouldn't want to see that. And maybe KC Philadelphia is what they want to see. Maybe even to a certain extent KC Washington. Only because of the Commanders pulling themselves out from the Daniel Snyder era with the rookie quarterback and with a coach who has been to a Super Bowl. All right, maybe that would be the second game that they would want. I'm sure they want Kansas City there no matter what. But how I look at it is that, to me, which would be a lot more sexier, Buffalo and Washington would be, I get it. It's going to be a ratings bonanza despite who's in the game. But you're going to have two organizations and two fan bases. One that hasn't won a Super Bowl ever, and the other that has not won a Super Bowl since the last time they faced one another in a Super Bowl, again, 33 years ago. So for Buffalo and Washington, I think that would be, first and foremost, what the NFL would want. Yes, we could talk about everything I mentioned about KC, but put that aside. We'd want to see two teams that haven't been to the Super Bowl in a million years. That would be, to me, number one. Number two, I don't think Washington and KC would have that appeal for whatever the reason. And interestingly enough, I know a lot of controversy, obviously, with the former Redskins, the former team name of the Washington football team at the time. And then now you have the Commanders, and you would have had Chiefs, Commanders, and Commander-in-Chief. You had that wordplay, if you want to call it that, and Chiefs, Redskins. Obviously, that would have been, but you don't have to worry about that. But even though I don't think Washington and Kansas City, to me, is that appealing. But I would think second would be KC Philadelphia, then followed by, I will go as far as saying Washington and KC, and then the final matchup will be Buffalo Philadelphia. Because to me, Buffalo Philadelphia doesn't really have a lot of appeal. We saw Buffalo in there 2 years ago, and we saw Philadelphia 2 years ago, and Buffalo, as we know, hasn't played. And they played each other in the regular season last year, to where Philadelphia, again, by the skin of their teeth, won that game down at the Link. So overall, in my opinion, it's Buffalo, Washington, KC, Philadelphia, KC, Washington, and then Buffalo, Philadelphia. Because to me, I get it that could be an appealing Super Bowl. It's the Northeast, whatever, but I think that would be fourth in the pecking order. But it doesn't matter, because whether Fox, doesn't matter what game they get or what Roger Goodell's going to say, they're going to get a ton of ratings. Everybody's going to watch this game. I'm sure they're going to want to have the Chiefs there for everything that I mentioned. But still, I would think that would be the pecking order for what I think maybe not only just a sports fan, but even what would Roger Goodell would want. Because to have Buffalo and Washington, I mean, who wouldn't want to have that in the Super Bowl? You want to have a team that hasn't won a Super Bowl. Just like Lions-Bills would have been an all-time bonanza, considering both teams have never won a Super Bowl and the Lions never going. But obviously that's moot. And that's what we have there when it comes to this weekend and beyond. But as far as now, as I shift gears to go through the coaching news of the week. Now, as we expected, the coordinators from the Lions, both the offensive and defense coordinators, have found head coaching jobs. And we'll start with Ben Johnson, who goes from Detroit to Chicago, stays in the division to be the guy that is going to groom Caleb Williams. And you would think that that's going to be a marriage made in heaven. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see on that. Ben Johnson, I guess, I don't know if he wants to stick it to the Lions. I don't think that that's the case, but I'm sure the quarterback was appealing, maybe to a certain extent, because it's the Bears, it's Chicago, and his familiarity with the division. That was one where I'm sure that he probably drove to Chicago knowing that he's going to have an opportunity to coach this player, a former number one overall, and let's see what kind of success they're going to have there in Chicago. If Ben Johnson is going to be that guy, it's going to lead the Bears back to a Super Bowl that we haven't seen since the 2007 season when they lost to the Colts there in Super Bowl 41. And then you have the Jets take the defensive coordinator from the Lions, and one Aaron Glenn. We know his story, former number one pick there at the Jets many years ago, cornerback, very good corner in his own right. when he played in the 90s. And I hate to say this and rain on the Jet fan parade, but I'm not going to say you're puzzled by the pick. I'm sure you're happy about it, knowing that as a former player, defensive guy. I know you've seen this role before with defensive guys, whether you're Robert Saleh, whether you're Eric Mangini, whether you're Todd Bowles, whether you're Herman Edwards. I get it. Rex Ryan, throw him in there. But the one thing that would have me just a little perturbed if I'm a Jet fan, the owner picked him, which is a good thing. But you haven't brought in a GM. Now, this whole Mike Tannenbaum scenario where they're going out looking for head coaches, why don't you just bring Mike Tannenbaum back to be your GM? And he was the guy that pretty much was the one that helped this hire to bring Aaron Glenn back home to be now the head coach of the Jets. Because now you're going to have a GM that's in there that did not pick the coach. And now you're going to have a meeting of the minds, GM and coach, to see who you're going to draft here, number 7 overall in this upcoming draft. And that's not to say that they're not going to get along or there's going to be a disconnect from the start, but you would want to have some continuity there. You would want to, if you're Woody Johnson, it would have been nice to say, all right, here's my GM, and you could tell the GM, this is the guy that I want. And of course, the GM's going to have to, I don't want to say capitulate, but he's going to have to say, all right, fine, boss, I have this guy in mind, or maybe let's interview this person, but Aaron Glenn, I understand. He comes home, etc. That's it. But now you're going to hire a GM, and it's going to be a scenario where if the GM and the coach, if there's going to be any, let's say, difference of opinion, and now with the New York media, this is going to be a firestorm, which you're going to have to look at the owner, and we all know that the owner's been inept since he's owned the team. Granted that he has made it to a couple of conference championships along the way, but I'm not going to say that this is going to be disastrous. But not having a GM first and then you hire the coach as opposed to doing it the other way around, it's just very Jet-like. I'll just leave it at that and spare the rest of the details along the way. Now, I don't know what's going on in Jacksonville. Speaking of an owner who's clueless, they brought in Liam Coen, the offensive coordinator of the Buccaneers, who looked like he was going to get the head coaching job now that Doug Peterson's out. But for what happened there with the GM, Trent Baalke, the former 49er GM, which we know he's had his issues with head coaches in the past, a la Jim Harbaugh in San Francisco. But Liam Coen, who withdrew and rebuffed whatever head coaching position that the Jaguars were looking to give him, well, it seemed minutes right after that, they fired Trent Baalke. So he's out of a job and on the street there in Jacksonville. Now they got to bring in a GM. If you're Shad Khan, the owner, and if you liked Liam Coen, you would think, oh, you know what? We may have to do a jet move and just hire the coach and then we'll bring in a GM afterwards, because if that was the guy that they wanted, and for whatever reason, maybe Trent Baalke had a difference of say in that room. Now, granted, he's not going to have the final say because the owner's going to have to be on board, as we know, but Baalke, he got jettisoned and shown his walking papers. So what do the ownership of the Jaguars do as far as getting a head coach in the facility? So that we'll have to wait and see. But it is Jacksonville. It's not a big-time job. I get it. They got a quarterback there who has potential to be very good to great. But that's what you have there with the coaching scenario there in the NFL here over the last couple of days. And then Tennessee, who has the number 1 pick overall, is hoping to trade their pick. So you have to wonder which teams are now going to be jockeying for position to try to get to number 1. Granted, this isn't a quarterback class from last year, whether you had Drake May or the aforementioned Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels. You have Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. Are those guys that we still haven't gotten to a combine? We still haven't gotten to a pro day? We still haven't gotten a scenario where we can really see if their stock shoots up the rankings there? So that's what we have there with the NFL. Keep that in mind there as we move along there with Tennessee as they're open to trading their first pick. I'll stick with the football here and go to the college championship. And I'm sorry, people, there isn't really much to unpack. I talked about this on the channel there a couple days ago. Not an instant reaction because Ohio State was pretty much set. And you wouldn't have thought that from the opening series by the Fighting Irish as they go 18 plays, 75 yards. They take almost 10 minutes off the clock. And you thought to yourself, wow, that was probably, if you couldn't even script a perfect start for the Fighting Irish against an Ohio State team that's been on the express track to this game for all the teams that they beat along the way, then, I mean, I don't know. It would have been a scenario where Ohio State, they may have been on their heels after that drive, and you would have thought, okay, well, let's see what's going to happen here. So what do? They respond with a long drive in their own right, bleeds into the second quarter, and they tie the game there at 7. And then that's when the Notre Dame offense went to sleep for about 2.5 quarters. They went backwards on their next possession. The following possession after that, they gained a total, I believe, 5 yards. And then after that, they gained 7 yards to where Ohio State kept chugging along. They went drive after drive after drive. So, yes, they were down 7-0. They made it 7-7, 14-7, 21-7 at the half. And you thought to yourself, oh, forget about it. This game is kaput. It's over. And before you know it, they put up 31 unanswered points on the Fighting Irish. It was 31-7, and you could have said, good night, I'm going to bed. There's no way I'm going to watch the rest of this game. Now, not that you missed an interesting ending, but then all of a sudden, after their slumber in the middle part of the game, the Fighting Irish wake up. They get a touchdown there to make it 31-15. And then on the ensuing possession to where the Ohio State, they had a fumble there. Notre Dame recovers it. They get the ball not deep in their zone. What was it? Around the 42, 43-yard line of the Buckeyes. And as they try to get into the end zone, they had a 1st and goal. It was 4th and goal at the 9-yard line. And instead of trying to go for it there, what happens? They kick a field goal and it goes wide left. No, I think it hit off the cross. No, it went wide left. And at that point, I get it. 4th and goal at the 9, that's risky. It's not 4th and goal from the 2 or from the 1 or even from the 3 for that matter. But you're still down 2 scores. At that point, it was 9:27 left to go in the game. Take a shot there. Why not? The points there, all right, well, you cut it to 13. I mean, seriously, that's still a scenario where you're going to need 2 touchdowns to begin with. So why not take a shot there? It's already late in the game or late enough to take a risk. Who knows? If you throw in the end zone, you may get a flag or you may get a hold or something along those lines. So that was, to me, mistake number 1. And then even though they did get the touchdown there and the 2-point to make it 31-23, but on a 3rd and 11, they get that pass there, 56 yards to Jeremiah Smith and Will Howard. Give him credit. He played well and understood that Riley Leonard, who I had a lot of question marks, and that was the key focal point of Ohio State, trying to have him pass the ball more than he runs. He's not a great quarterback with the arm. Yes, and the stats certainly show that he had a big game, but a lot of that, of course, was late in the game. As I mentioned, the middle part of the game, they didn't move the ball. They went backwards on their first drive after the Buckeyes made it 7-7. They were 3 and outs the whole second quarter. Into the third quarter was the same deal, and it was until 31-7 when they finally woke up, and that's when Riley Leonard was throwing a ball as if he was Rick Meyer in his day back in the 90s. So for Ohio State, give it up. They were on a mission to win this title after losing to Michigan, as we know. And when they beat Oregon the way they did, that's when you had to really take this team seriously. And yes, they still had to overcome and beat Texas, which they did. And then obviously in the championship game here, kudos to what the Buckeyes have done. And I don't want to hear from any Ohio State fan in the country, even if you live in Columbus. And yes, I get it. You still have to wear the sting of losing to Michigan in your building. But guess what? You have the last laugh. You won the national championship. So let Michigan puff out their chest. Oh, we beat you. We stamped the flag right there on the O at the 50-yard line, whatever. And yes, that sucks. Yes, that stings. Yes, you got to wait till next year until you go to Ann Arbor to see if you could finally beat Michigan, which you haven't done in 4 years. But guess what? You won the title. That's all that matters. So the in-season rivalry that you have, and we could talk about that till we're blue in the face, doesn't matter. And even Michigan say, well, hey, we beat you this year. We won the title last year. But that's last year. And yes, you did beat us, but guess what? We have the ring. You guys don't. So, and to me, as I like to sing every now and again, it don't mean a thing if you ain't got that ring. So, shoo-wop, 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 hoo-wah. There you go. So that's it with the football. let me move it along here. Let me get the high tops, break those out as we turn our attention to the hardwood. And I'll get into more college basketball once we get, probably starting after the championship games, as I know you have a lot of flip-flopping there with the number one teams in the country throughout it all. And I believe currently Auburn is now number one right now, as I saw the other day. And yeah, I've been following it. I haven't been on top of it. I'll be honest, people. I haven't really zeroed in to keep myself involved. Yes, I've been following my Georgetown Hoyas. Not that I expect them to do anything big, and they finally snapped a 3-game losing streak. But yes, Auburn is your number one team in the country, followed by Duke, Iowa State, Alabama. A lot of SEC. You would think we're watching football here than basketball, because you got obviously Alabama, Florida, Tennessee, Kentucky. You have those teams, Texas A&M. A lot of teams in the SEC that are representing here in the top 25, really in the top 15 right out of the gate. So Ole Miss ranked 16th. So you have that. St. John's here locally, 20th. I'm sure that the Johnnies are ecstatic to see that they're a part of the consciousness when it comes to the NCAA. But as far as the NFL is concerned, the NBA, talked about the NFL for the last 35 minutes or so. NBA at this present moment, and this is what happens when you have a long season. Do I have to talk about Jimmy Butler again? Do I really have to get into that? I guess I do, right? Well, the only reason why I bring that up is because he missed a flight there yesterday that was going to Milwaukee. So they said, stay home. You're suspended for the next 2 games. And now it's at a point where they can't play him anymore. I don't know why he missed his flight. That hasn't come out as of yet. You know that the front office, Pat Riley, Eric Spoelstra, they're not going to reveal anything unless Jimmy Butler does. And I know in his press conference there last week before the game, he said that the truth will come out. So he missed a flight. Not going to play Milwaukee or Brooklyn here over the next couple of games. And now you have to broker a trade. And who knows, maybe that ball is going to start to roll here based on what the Suns did as they secured 3 first-round picks in a very complex trade. Because, as you know, the Suns had traded a lot of picks in their own right when you look at what they did in the trade for when they traded DeAndre Ayton. That whole scenario, they had that 3-team deal with Drew Holiday going to Portland and that whole rigmarole, and therefore losing a lot of picks. And remember, the Kevin Durant trade, they lost a lot of picks there, and Kevin Durant went back to Brooklyn last night and even talked about his experience there, which wasn't all bad, as he said, and not to unpack that right now. But remember, they traded a lot of their first-round picks to Brooklyn, so they were trying to see if they could procure a lot of picks to maybe broker a deal to bring Jimmy Butler there. The likelihood of Butler going to the Valley of the Sun, and we all know that the Suns have underachieved this year. But for them to get 3 first-round picks to sweeten the pot to maybe get Butler, but they're still going to have to bring another team on to broker this 3 or maybe even 4-team trade, and this is why they got the first-round picks. And you say to yourself, wait a minute, how did they get first-round picks when they don't really have any first-round picks? Well, what they did was they traded their 2031 first-round pick to Utah, and then because of a combination of deals that were made over the last couple of years with all these teams, they have an opportunity to get the worst of either Cleveland or Minnesota's number 1 pick this year. The same for 2027 to also include Utah. And in 2029, the same where Cleveland, Minnesota, Utah. So the worst of those picks, they have those number 1 picks. So yes, they could package those deals or those picks in a deal to maybe get Butler or maybe have another team involved. So keep that in mind as we move forward here, because the deadline for the NBA trades are 2 weeks from today, February 6th at 3 p.m. So even if you put Butler on ice for 2 games, and they believe they have a game, is it Monday when they come back? Because if they're going to play tomorrow in Milwaukee, or tonight in Milwaukee, and then Saturday in Brooklyn, and then I believe the next game is Monday, they're going to try to see if they can swing a deal, you would think, by then. If not, they can't further suspend him. I guess they could probably put him, I don't know what the collective bargaining agreement is, whether they could put him on administrative leave or come up with an injury for him to not play here until they're able to trade him away. So, yes, the saga continues. What teams are going to now rise to the occasion here to see whether or not we could get this deal in place and have Butler out of Miami and elsewhere? So, yeah, and who knows what Butler, I mean, maybe there was some intent there. Maybe he said, you know what, I'm going to purposely miss this flight. With Butler at this stage, you can never know, and you certainly can't trust him based on the behavior he had there in Minnesota, maybe to a certain degree in Philadelphia, possibly Chicago, who knows. But we know that he has a bit of a track record here, and if he said, oh, I have to be at the team playing by 1:30, well, I'm going to show up at 2:30, and therefore, now he's going to miss these 2 games and not get paid for it, but I'm sure at this point, anything for him to get off this team, that's what he's doing, and he's pulling, as we like to say, that NBA player empowerment move, which is looks like that's what's taking place here. Then you have the scenario regarding Dereck Lively. I bring him up too because with the injuries that have hit the Mavericks, whether it's Luka, and who knows, he's going to be evaluated here in the next week or so upon his return. I believe he has that calf issue. Kyrie has come back, but he's been in and out of the lineup. And now you lose Dereck Lively, a big man who could provide a lot of rebounding and defense. He's going to be out 2 to 3 months with an ankle fracture, so that's a tough break, no pun intended, for the Mavericks, who have the Celtics coming in this weekend. And we'll talk about the schedule in a little bit. Rematch, their first rematch of the NBA Final last year. And then you had SGA. We talked about him a few weeks ago. 54 points, career high last night against Utah. And you would think right now he's the front runner for the MVP. I'm sure there's some people that may say Donovan Mitchell. All right, fine, you want to throw him in the mix. But I would think the way he's played, and I get it, Nikola Jokic has had a monster year too. What is he averaging? 32 points, 13 rebounds, and he's almost averaging a triple-double as a big man. And I get it, but I don't know if he's going to be the front runner to win it. Granted, you still have a little bit more past the halfway part of the season. So you got to keep that in mind. But SGA, a lot of people thought maybe he should have won last year, but he is certainly on the fast track to win it this year. So kudos to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and what he's done here for a Thunder team that's 36-7, tied with the Cavaliers for the best record in the sport. And that's going to mean a lot because when you get to the postseason, whoever has the best record is going to have home field for the NBA Finals. And for the Cavaliers, they've actually lost. They've been 3-3 in their last 6 games, so they've hit a little bit of a skid here for them. So keep that in mind as we move it along with the progress of the Cavaliers and what they've done. Still a 6-game lead in the Eastern Conference over the Celtics. And everything is pretty much the same when it comes to the standings in both the East and the West. Not a lot of separation there with teams. And the Sixers, who I know that they've been trying to get themselves back, but they haven't. They've lost 7 in a row, and now 2 games in the loss, but 3 back for the final spot there. The 10 seed there by the Chicago Bulls. And then out west, I know the Suns, as I mentioned, they're just a game over 500. And the Warriors, not having Draymond Green in the lineup, he's been out. So, yeah, I don't know what else I could really shake a stick at here when it comes to what is happening there in the NBA as far as their schedule goes over the course of the next few days. Tonight, this afternoon, you have a series in Paris. They call it the Paris series, where the Spurs are going to play the Pacers. And, of course, with Victor Wembanyama and his presence being from France. I don't know if he's from Paris. I guess he's probably from Paris. Excuse me here. I got something in my eye. So the locals will get to see Wembanyama. And remember, they already saw him there in Paris during the Olympics. But now they get a chance to see him in a pro uniform. They're going to play today, 2 p.m., and then they're going to show the first game of an NBA tripleheader on Saturday, where San Antonio will be the home team, Indiana will be the home team today, 2 o'clock. So, of course, if you do the math, what are they, 5 hours ahead, 7 o'clock game. So you're going to see a double dip of games in Paris where Wembanyama is going to get, I'm sure, a rousing ovation and a homecoming for him. But other games throughout, Dallas at OKC, although Dallas is wounded, as I discussed. You have the Celtics, who beat the Clippers in overtime last night, so you're going to have Lakers-Celtics tonight. That on TNT. We'll see how that bodes for the Lakers and the Celtics. Tomorrow, Cleveland at Philadelphia. That's the only really big game there. The triple-header, as I mentioned, Indiana-San Antonio at 12, 3 o'clock, Denver at Minnesota, ABC, and then at 5:30 at Boston at Dallas, as I mentioned, a rematch of the finals last year. But with all the injuries, who knows how that's going to play out. Certainly not going to be a full squad there for the Mavericks, similar to what we saw last year. Then you have Houston at Cleveland. Good game there. Sacramento, New York. The hottest team in the league is Sacramento. You could talk about Cleveland. You could talk about a lot of these other teams, OKC, but they've won 10 of their last 11 games and are now shooting up in the Western Conference. So they'll play the Knicks there on Saturday. LA at Golden State. As a matter of fact, wow, I didn't realize off the top of my head. So you have 4 games, kind of doing like a pseudo Christmas Day extravaganza with the 5 games, but instead they're going to do the 4. So the nightcap out of those 3 games of Indiana, San Antonio, the Denver-Minnesota game, as well as Boston-Dallas, is Lakers at Golden State, which we've seen a billion times before, as we know. Then you have Milwaukee at the Clippers there on Saturday. Sunday's just a 1-game Oklahoma City at Portland. Obviously, it's a big football Sunday. So that's what you have there with the NBA. On the ice, NHL's I lace up my skates. It's pretty much the same deal. The only storyline that you have is Connor McDavid. He's going to face and not going to appeal a 3-game suspension for the cross-checks that he had, and also Tyler Myers for that matter. In my era, on Monday, he and Tyler Myers did not get into a cross-checking, high-sticking battle. Toward the end of that game in Vancouver, McDavid got into a entanglement, should I even use that word here, with a player there, Connor Garland, and obviously a lot of extracurricular stuff, high sticks, some punches. So for McDavid, who did get a suspension a few years back from a check on an Islander player at the time, the defenseman Nick Leddy, so I guess they got to look at his quote-unquote history, so therefore they gave him 3 games for this. Different type of incident altogether, but of course the NHL is going to track this. I got NFL again on the brain, people. The National Hockey League is going to track this, so although McDavid is the game's best player, and they're going to have to say, Connor, you're going to have to sit out these 3 games, so he will sit out. He's embarrassed and certainly not happy with how he behaved there on the ice, considering his legion of fans and disappointing the franchise and his teammates, etc. So you know he's a class act and certainly owned up to that. Then you have the Devils, a big injury for them as their goaltender Jacob Markstrom, who got into a collision with one of the Bruin forwards. Justin Brazeau left the crease, got hit. Who knows how long he's going to be out, but the coach did say it could be a significant amount of time. So we'll have to see and monitor how long he's going to be out of the lineup. And other than that, the big story in the NHL right this second, I have to say, are the Rangers, because the Rangers, who have been just rumbling, bumbling, and fumbling, have righted the ship to where in their last 9 games, they are 6-0-3 and have gone from last place. Now, they haven't gotten far. They've gone from last place to 5th place there in the Metropolitan, but they are inching closer. They're 3 points behind the Blue Jackets. They're still 10 points behind the Devils, but you would think, as they try to battle it out for a wild card spot, at least for right now, we'll see how far that the records and how far that this streak will take them. But you have to give it up. They've played well. Igor Shesterkin is now, I've recorded back-to-back shutouts, I believe. And let's see now the Rangers will take off and get themselves to a point where they could get back near the top, or at least close enough, because they still are 19 points behind the Capitals, who have the best record and the best point total in the sport. So Rangers have certainly played very well here, and I guess you could say you'd expect that because they weren't going to be floundering in last place or near the bottom of the Metropolitan Division. So I'm not going to say congratulations. I'm not a Ranger fan, so I won't give them that. But I do have to give them their due to know that they've turned it around, and now let's see if they can steamroll themselves into the wild card picture and even beyond that. But as far as anything else, pretty much the same. I know Vegas has lost 4 in a row, but Edmonton is still just a point behind them as they lost their last 2. Winnipeg has a sizable lead on Minnesota there in the Central. Toronto, 3-point lead over the Panthers. Status quo, people. Capitals have won 5 in a row. Ovechkin hasn't scored since that overtime goal over the weekend. So NHL, that's what we have. Now let me get into the batter's box and talk a little baseball here, as I'll get into that. And the only really news that I have with baseball, you have a couple of signings, nothing really to write home about. The Guardians signed Paul Sewald, the former closer of the Mets, Mariners, and most recently the Diamondbacks. 1-year deal there to fortify that bullpen there with Emmanuel Clase. And we saw how that played out there in the postseason, more so against the Yankees than anybody else. And the Angels added Tim Anderson, the former White Sox, even Marlin, for a cup of coffee last year. Let's see if he can resurrect his career. And I didn't talk about this the other day, but the Mets re-signed Jesse Winker, as well as, not re-signing, but they signed A.J. Minter. Of course, they weren't going to go for Tanner Scott, who got the 4-year, $72 million deal. But A.J. Minter, good reliever in his own right, a lefty, which they needed. 2 years, $22 million. Let's see if he can pay dividends here in this upcoming year and beyond. But the real reason why I want to talk baseball is that the Hall of Fame announcement, I believe on Monday, where the latest enshrinees come July are going to be the following. Ichiro Suzuki, who got all but one vote, similar to Derek Jeter. Who that one vote is? Come on. Own up to it. Step to the forefront and fess up. CC Sabathia, who got 86% of the vote. And Billy Wagner, the reliever closer, got 82% of the vote. Players that just missed, and of course you have to get 75% of the baseball writers in order to be elected and to have that distinction and honor. Carlos Beltran, 70.3% of the vote. You would think next year, and next year is actually going to be a weak class. So we'll have to keep that in mind when it comes to next year's balloting. But Beltran at 70.3, Andrew Jones 66.2, and then there is a big drop-off after that. Chase Utley 39.8, A-Rod 37.1, and Manny was at 35. So for next year, Beltran, you would think if it's not going to be a stiff class, I know Albert Pujols is not going to be for another few years. You know Pujols is going to be on roller skates. He's probably going to be another guy that's going to get all but one vote. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But Andrew Jones certainly was on the path, but those last 5, 6, 7 years, not Hall of Fame worthy in my eyes. We know that he was a great center fielder. Not good, great. And put up power numbers, hit 50 home runs 1 year, I believe, when he was a member. Was he still with Atlanta then? Yes, he was. But not an average hitter. Did it for power. Did have a few hundred RBI seasons, but wasn't dominant offensively when it comes to him being a Hall of Famer. And Beltran, yes, he to me is a borderline guy. Did put up big numbers. Was a Rookie of the Year. Was in the running for an MVP a couple of times. But yeah, but he's going to get in. I get that. And we know that in this day and age, borderline players are going to get into the Hall of Fame. It's for the very good, not for the great. But as far as the guys who made it, Ichiro, he's a Hall of Famer. Granted, he's a singles hitter, and we understand that he was a one-dimensional offensive player. Maybe a little bit more. That's a little bit too strong because he was a good base stealer, a very good base runner, and also an above-average outfielder with a great arm. But Ichiro, he's deserving. I'll give it to him. He got 3,000 hits. Also won a Rookie of the Year and an MVP the same year. So you know what? I'll give Ichiro his due and throw him bouquets. CC Sabathia, now he was 90 games over 500. He was a guy that did win a Cy Young in 2007 and put up big numbers when he was a member of the Yankees. His first 2 years, he won 40 games. He won 19, I think it was 19-8 and 21-8 in his first 2 years. Or maybe it was 21-7. I think he was 40-15 the first 2 years as a Yankee. He's had dominant years. And even when he got traded to Milwaukee in the middle of the 2008 season and he dominated that run where Milwaukee went to the postseason. But then when he got to October, he was giving up home runs left and right, including a grand slam to Shane Victorino of all people. But to me, he's a borderline guy. Now, he did win over 250 games, and to get a 300-game winner is not an automatic lock. So I guess 250 or even 200 for that matter. Now, I don't have a problem with him getting in, and I'm a small guy type of room, but you know what? I'm not mad at it. I don't think he's a Hall of Famer in my eyes. He did strike out over 3,000. You got to throw that in the mix too. But, listen, I can't be angry. It's not like it's a Harold Baines type of choice, and we all know that was by the Veterans Committee. But, all right, no problem there with CC. But Billy Wagner I have a problem with. Now, he did have dominant years with Houston, had a couple of very good years with the Mets, but have you looked at his postseason numbers? his postseason numbers are atrocious. He has an ERA over 10, meaning that for every time he came in relief, he was giving up a run every time. Now, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know his ERA is over 10, and I can tell you his days in the Mets, he blew games left and right, and he was a guy that, think about this, when the game was tied in the 9th inning, Game 7 of the 2006 National League Championship Series, where it was all for all the marbles. And Yadier Molina, remember he hit that home run to make it 3-1, and we know what happened. Carlos Beltran, the aforementioned, the call strike 3, Adam Wainwright. Who was the one that gave up that 2-run homer in the top of the 9th? It wasn't Billy Wagner. It was Aaron Heilman. That's all you need to know. The trust factor and even the confidence factor that Willie Randolph, the manager, had in putting Billy Wagner there in the 9th inning of a tied game for your season. He's not a Hall of Famer in my eyes. And I get it. It's about dominance. And everybody who's listening to the podcast is about dominant players. But to me, he wasn't a dominant closer. He had dominant seasons. Dominant closer is Mariano. And I'll even give you Trevor Hoffman, who also spit the bit in big spots. Do I even need to go into the back of his baseball card? It's not about Trevor Hoffman today. So for guys like that, or Raleigh Fingers, or Dennis Eckersley, who won the Cy Young as a closer, I don't see that in Billy Wagner. And I will just move on from there because I want to wrap up with the Australian Open as I break out the tennis racket. And here we are now, the final few days, and the women's finals already set. I'll get to that in a moment. But you have a scenario where the other day in a quarterfinal, Novak Djokovic against Carlos Alcaraz. We know that that's the old guard versus the new and up-and-coming. And I can't even say up-and-coming because he has already arrived, considering he has already won 4 major tournaments. But here was the deal about this match where Djokovic, who had sustained a bit of an injury, and I don't know if it was cramps with his hip or his groin, but after Alcaraz won the first set, 3-6, I believe, and having to take a timeout was Novak, from that point on, he stormed, and I don't know if that was gamesmanship. I don't know if that was a scenario where he tried to throw off the scent, knowing that Alcaraz got off to a flying start, and maybe just thought to say, hey, let me take a blow here, and maybe kind of get in his head, a la gamesmanship, as I mentioned. And from that point on, you saw the old Novak. And I heard something, I can't take credit for this, but this was, I guess, for a young Alcaraz, who is 21 years of age. He'll be 22 in May. He doesn't have a street fighter in him. He doesn't have that killer instinct. He doesn't have that, oh, okay, you're going to do this? Well, guess what? Now I'm going to dominate in this way. So between the ears and in the chest, still developing, but he doesn't have that assassin-like approach. Because if that was the case, he would have said, oh, you're going to do this to me? All right, now I got you. We know that Alcaraz's game, whether it's his forehand, his serve, his approaching the net, soft game, it doesn't matter. Alcaraz has all the tools. His future is looking super bright. Although he may have him and Jannik Sinner could be the next 2 great tennis players that we may see here. To kind of pass the torch from the Djokovic, Federer, and Nadal stage of the 2000s and 2010s. But Djokovic, he did a number on Alcaraz to where he was able to win the match. And Alcaraz, again, doesn't have that street fighter in him. Hopefully he takes that with him and knows that, if a scenario like that happens again, I got to go in and just try to eviscerate him. And not just try to say, all right, well, let me just play it as it comes and I'll just take it from there. He cannot have that approach when it comes to anyone, but in particular, a guy who knows his way around big-time tennis like Novak Djokovic. So now he'll face Alexander Zverev, which Zverev could beat him, and it could lead to a Djokovic-Jannik Sinner final, which we would think Sinner's going to get there. Ben Shelton, who's had a very decent run here in the last couple of years, and more so the latter part, him getting, I believe he got to a U.S. Open semifinal before losing, I believe, to Sinner. And now he's going to face Sinner again. So let's see if he can hang tight, maybe get to a 4th, dare I even say 5th set. We'll have to see. And if Djokovic could get past Zverev, which isn't a shoo-in, you're going to have another old guard versus a young guard, and I would like to see that match there Sunday down in Melbourne for a championship. Now, as far as the women's side goes, you had a big upset where Madison Keys beat Iga Swiatek. Now, Swiatek ranked number 2 in the world. Aryna Sabalenka, who in her match earlier beat Paula Badoza, straight sets, and now is seeking a three-peat there down under. She's won the last 2, looking to get a three-peat, which we haven't seen since Martina Hingis back in the late 90s. So for Sabalenka, she's not going to face Swiatek. She's going to face Madison Keys, who beat Swiatek in what was actually a pretty good match. It went to a third and final set and had a tiebreak there in the first, which she lost, and then here in a tiebreak in the final round, or in the final go-round. And for Madison Keys, making it to a final. The last time she made it to a final was, I believe, 8 years ago at the U.S. Open, and now here she is. It's going to be a tough, because you're going up against someone who could smell it, someone who's looking to get that third straight title. And Sabalenka right now is ranked number 2 in the world, and if she wins, you would think that's she's ranked number 1, Swiatek 2. She's going to want to keep that number 1 perch as well as try to go for a sweep. And if Keys does win this, this will be a big-time upset. So we'll have to wait and see there what's going to happen. That will be on Saturday, where you'll have the women's final, and of course, as I mentioned, Sunday, the men's final, to put a close on the book of the first Grand Slam of 2025, and I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to happen. Does Djokovic make it to a final? Does Ben Shelton do anything as far as trying to thwart Sinner to get to a final? And if it is Djokovic and Sinner, can Djokovic do what he did to Alcaraz and beating a young player who obviously has arrived and is going to be a force for years to come? So all that plays into it. You know I'll be watching, and we'll rehash it and recap it there on Monday. And that'll do it, my good people. Another episode just about in the books, as always. Thank you so much for stopping by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the wonderful world of sports. If you haven't done so, please subscribe, rate, review, throw me a few stars, write a review. Come on, people. Let's increase the visibility of this podcast to get others who aren't familiar with it. Also, go to the YouTube channel at JReels, which I put up content there daily. I understand a lot of sports content, but there's going to be a lot of lifestyle content. I put a vlog there a couple weeks ago. Was it a couple weeks? Maybe a couple weeks this weekend. Check that out. I have more to come in the weeks and months ahead. And also that big announcement coming next week, toward the end of next week, maybe early part of next week, but no later than the first Monday in February. That I can promise you. So stay tuned for that. And if you want to hit me up on any of my socials, you can do so the following. Again, the YouTube channel at JReels. Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JReels Podcast. Twitter, JReels1, just a number, or the old-fashioned way, the JReels Podcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. It's in the blood, it's in the DNA, doing this since birth. Well, talking sports since birth is more like it. But I've been doing this going on 7 years, and now almost independently for 1 full year, full time. That's right, trying to generate some income, trying to make a living doing what it is that I love. And yes, a lot of the lessons along the way is I try to build this little engine that could to heights unknown, to be a podcast that's on people's lips, that's on people's consciousness, to know that I talk about all these sports, NBA, NHL, Major League Baseball, tennis, National Football League, college football on one podcast in under an hour and a half. In this case, an hour and 15 minutes. Where else are you going to get that? Well, you know, as long as I'm sitting in front of this camera and in front of this microphone, I will continue to deliver nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JReels Podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx to South Beach to South Central to South Pacific and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JReels Podcast, on the flip, baby.